Indeed, distinguishing the sacred from the secular is just the first step in defining a work's cultural context, for we shall consider particular uses for compositions in the church, in the home, etc. Performing forces. You have good reason to know the performing forces for compositions beyond the fact that you will need to match performing forces with titles and/or genres on most tests of this course. Basically, performing forces refers to what it takes to perform a work. Specifically, it refers to the type, the number, and the combination of instruments and/or voices that it takes to perform a composition, and it really is a useful bit of information because you can use it to tell one work apart from another. For example, doesn't the music performed by a choir singing without instrumental accompaniment sound quite a bit different from music performed by a marching band? Form. Form is something that we are more likely to associate with tangible objects, but it is important in the world of music and in this course because you will have to match forms with titles and/or genres on many tests in this course. Also, you can use form to distinguish one musical work from another. Basically, the form of a musical composition is determined by the number and the type of sections it has, and these sections are defined by musical ideas or melodies. A melody, as we shall see, is a complete musical idea. The sections of the form of a musical composition are identified by capital letters. If you have had to analyze the rhyme schemes of poems in an English class, you probably will recall that you used lowercase letters to accomplish that task. In order to determine what a series of letters that defines a musical form means, let us examine the example given here. Its sections are labeled as A, B, A, and B with what looks like an apostrophe after it. The first section, A, is a complete musical idea or melody. The second section, B, is also a complete musical idea or melody, but as you can tell from its name, it is different from A. Basically, B is different from A. The third section, A, is an exact repetition of A. This is as obvious a fact as can be, for A equals A. The fourth section, however, is not simply B, and not, therefore, an exact repetition of the second section, because of the prime mark after it, and it is read as B prime. Basically, B prime, that is, B with a prime mark, that's what we call the apostrophe in this context, is a varied repetition of B. If it were an exact repetition of B, it would be labeled simply as B, but since it has a slightly altered repetition of B, it is labeled as B prime. Indeed, isn't it interesting how much information you can learn about a composition just by looking at such a series of letters? Texture. Although texture, rather like form, is something that we are more likely to associate with tangible things, it is important in the world of music and in this course. In fact, since texture is absolutely essential to discussing, exploring, and describing works, and since it is the most basic and therefore should be the first thing that can be said about a composition, it is my goal to make this aspect of music count for at least 10%, that is, one letter grade, of your course grade. Indeed, you will find your course average 10 points lower than it could have been if you choose to ignore this aspect of music. Really. Basically, texture refers to the number of melodies that are performed at the same time in a work and how these melodies interact with one another. The terminology for musical textures is in a state of flux currently. Hey, that's just life. So you will find that a single term might be applied to different phenomena in different text, reference works, etc. You can be certain, however, that the terms you encounter in this course will be applied consistently and that their use is the one that you need to know for this course. You will be provided with the name of the texture in both its noun and adjectival forms, its literal meaning, if it is helpful, and its musical meaning. Basically, if the literal meaning of the name for a texture is given to you, it has been done because there is something about it that will help you to recall the musical meaning of the word, the one that you absolutely must know for each musical texture. In fact, this array of details, name, literal meaning, etc., will be followed whenever we encounter technical terms in this course. It is one of those things that you will come to expect as part of your exploration of music. Just as there are two very basic categories for cultural context and many more specific ones for each of them, there are two very basic categories of musical textures, and we will consider a significant number of types of one of these categories. You can expect to be presented with at least part of the following array of information for each of the musical textures covered during the first 3 units of this course: the adjectival and noun forms of its name, the meaning of its stems, if it is helpful, its literal meaning, if it is helpful, and its musical meaning or meanings. You can be certain that you will be provided with everything that is necessary to understand this important segment of the terminology that we will use in this course. Monophonic is the adjectival form of monophony. Notice the difference in pronunciation between them in terms of syllabic accent. Monophonic, accent on the first syllable, and monophony, accent on the second syllable. Basically, the first is used to describe something, and the second is a thing. Notice that the words are similar and that both of them have the Greek stem phone, P-H-O-N, in them. Phone means sound, as in telephone, and mono means one. The literal meaning of monophonic or monophony, therefore, is one sound. Although you might imagine that these words might refer to a song that is sung on one sound or one note, they actually refer to a texture, that is, the number of melodies in a given composition. Monophony or monophonic refers to music in which only one melody is played and or sung at one time. In a work with such a texture, therefore, only one sound or one note is heard at any one time, whether the work is performed by one or by 1,000 performers. Notice that the words polyphonic and polyphony follow the same pattern as monophonic and monophony. Notice that both pairs of works follow the same pattern in terms of syllabic accents: monophonic and polyphonic, accent on the first syllable for the adjectives, and monophony and polyphony, accent on the second syllable for the nouns. Notice that the words are similar and that all of them have the Greek stem phone, P-H-O-N, in them. Phone, as you already know, means sound, as in telephone, and poly means many or more than one. The literal meaning of polyphonic or polyphony, therefore, is many sounds. Although you might imagine that these words might refer to a song that is sung on many sounds or notes, they actually refer to texture, that is, the number of melodies in a given composition. Polyphony or polyphonic refers to music in which more than one melody is played and or sung at one time. In a work with such a texture, therefore, more than one sound or more than one note is likely to be heard at any one time. We shall review monophony and polyphony in the first unit of this course.